want to show you how I lesson plan with Google Slides. So the first thing is I have two different backgrounds you're going to see here. The blue one is typically what I use, but this year for the first month I wanted to change it up. So the first thing I do is I switch from putting the date on my slides to putting the day. So this is really helpful if you teach block, because I was having to remember to go back and change the day or make duplicates or copy over what I needed. So now I just use a day instead of a date, and so it's day 1, day 2, day 3, and that's very easy. Also, if our students are out for a day, it is very easy to just tell them, okay, you missed day 4, go look in the day 4 folder. So the next thing is that I start class with an icebreaker when they come in. It's typically on the board. It lasts for 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the day. It's normally just something funny. The one that they really like is Would You Rather? So that is the one that I was using a lot at the end of last year. So I'm going to start this year with those. Next is a learning objective or the target. So most schools require this. I put it on my slide, and that way it's covered for the day. And then our classroom expectations. So about 3 years ago, I started going over classroom expectations every single day. So here I would just list our rules, and every single day I would go over them. I have about 5 or 6 rules, and what I do is I hit on the common mistakes that happen. So the focus for the day might be that we didn't turn in our homework, or that an assignment is coming up and I noticed that on the last time we did it, maybe students didn't show their work. So I'm going to give them a focus on something I notice a lot of students are struggling with. And then I'm going to point out things that they are doing well. And one thing I like to point out is when they turn their work in on time. So yes, we do have a late penalty, but it does help if they turn their work in on time. So I just recognize, like, I noticed that this percentage of you all turned it in on time. Thank you very much. And so I just try to point out something positive that they're doing. Or I might say, thank you for following, and then name the expectation. So on my list of rules, some of them are simple, like come prepared for class. And we talk about prepared as coming with your paper and your pencil, making sure your computer is charged. So I might point out that that's what they've been doing. From there, I give them an agenda. So typically I use just a simple background. It has a list of what we're doing for the day. So again, just for this first month, I decided to switch it up a little bit and change up my agenda. So for my agenda, what I would just change here is I would copy this slide and just change what's in black underneath each one, because I kind of follow the same outline every single day. So then we would do our warm up, which is content focused. So it would be some type of math question I would show them here. And for the warm up, there's a few different ways that I go through the warm up. One is on the whiteboard. So I'll just put up the question on the board and I'll give them think time. Next is the waterfall. I just started using this last year. And what it is I give the students a set amount of time to think about the answer that's up on the screen. And then I say go, and I have a message board up, and it's like a waterfall. All of them put the message in the chat at once. So if you're thinking, how do you stop them from putting it in early? I have it turned off. So they can type in their answer and hit enter, but it's not going to appear until I open it. The next is a poll, and I just show it on my screen. Sometimes I ask them to write it in their notebook. So if this is something that we're going to reference during class, then I'll ask them to put it in their notebook. And then partner talk is just they solve it. They get a little bit of time to talk to a partner, or sometimes to do groups and just share their answers. So from here, we do notes, and I just put in my notes on these slides and I just copy them. Typically, I'll do notes in Lumio or Smart. I like Lumio because they have the interactive games that I can add to it. And then sometimes I use the teacher Desmos. I use that a lot if we're learning about graphing or something interactive where I need to see that they can do something particular. Then I'll use Desmos. So with notes, a big thing I like to remind them when we're doing notes, what should they write down? So this is part of the expectations. They are expected to come prepared for class. So when I'm doing notes, I'm telling them what to write down or what they should highlight. And then one thing I have to remind them about is when we do notes, how do they ask questions? So reminding them you raise your hand, reminding them they can send me a chat if they have a question. So during notes, typically use Lumio. I leave my chat open on the side so students can ask questions anonymously and their classmates won't know. And we go through this every single day. So as they take notes, I go through how they ask questions and what they should write down. From there, I always go to some type of practice, and this would be in the agenda. It would be listed for them, what kind of practice I want them to do, what they should be ready to submit. So if we're doing an activity, what are they going to turn into me?
what they need to do when they are done, which is really important, what they should do if they need help. So I do not want them yelling out. So I have to teach them and remind them daily, what are you going to do if you need help? Or how do you get help in this particular activity? So our practice includes Gim kits, Kahoots, worksheets, iExcel, MathSpace. Sometimes I do task cards. I do a few other things like pixel art activities, things like that. And from there, after practice, I have the next steps. So what should they do when they're done? So the next steps are typically one of two things: check for missing work. So even if I know a student has no missing work, I ask them to go check to make sure they have no missing work, and then to check their grades. So our students are allowed to redo their quizzes, and they can make corrections on their test. So check your grades, make sure you're happy because there are deadlines. So if they're not happy with a quiz, okay, let's study and then you go retake it. Or maybe they haven't finished correcting a test and they should work on that. But I always give them some next steps. To end the class, I like to do an exit ticket. I typically post it the last 2 to 3 minutes. And a few of the exit tickets they really like. They like the scale exit ticket. So normally I ask 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And they have a lot of fun with this. We study fractions, decimals, percents very early in the year. So my exit tickets typically aren't like 1, 2. I normally get like 1.5 or 3.2 or 5/3. They come up with some really creative ways to not just give me a straight answer, but to make it into a fraction, a decimal, or percent, to tell me how they're doing. Sometimes I'll just ask as an exit ticket, what questions do you have? What did you understand? And then what was easy? So there's certain topics that I know are very, very hard. And so I like to point out that they have been successful today by asking them what was easy. And then what could you use more examples of? So that's really eye opening to ask before we do a quiz or test, like on a review day, to ask this. And then that way, when we review the next class period, I know what they need to see more of. And then for test days, if you took a test, how did it go? I'm not asking them how they scored. I'm asking them, how did they feel? How did the process flow? Things like that. A lot of times they'll tell me what they missed and then tell me why they missed it. So this is just something I like to ask on test day. And then a fun one is pick an emoji for how today went. And they don't have to explain it. They can explain it, but they don't have to. So you always get a wide range there. So on test day, I typically just do a single slide. And again, this is the ones I'm using this year, kind of like the layout a little better. So for this, it's a test day. I would tell them their announcements. So what should they have for today? Give them some type of quote. Of course, they still get their would you rather, and then a checklist of what they should do. So once they complete the test, they're going to upload their work for me. They're going to check for missing work because, again, that's something I ask them to do daily. They're going to preview the next lesson. So I will post my slides and just quick videos for them about the current lessons, about upcoming lessons. So I just ask them to look at it. And that's actually really helpful if you have students that receive accommodations that involve like previewing, or if they receive accommodations where they need like to have teacher copies of notes. That's really helpful if they have like a video to go with it. So this is what I would post on test day. So these more summary themed slides are what I'm starting this year with. The blue slides are typically how I do my notes. So what I do is I have this laid out the way I want for the year. So now I'm just going to copy this template and I change the date and I update it for each day. It's pretty quick to do, and it saves me a lot of time, and it's really easy for planning for me. And so I just use Google Slides. This themed slide I got from slidesmania, but there's lots of free slide templates out there where you can just update them and use them in your classroom.